Hi, I'm Tom Martin. I'm the CEO and founder of LawDroid, and we're a company dedicated to helping lawyers supercharge their law firms with the help of AI legal assistants that can help with everything from case law research to analyzing documents to even capturing new leads. The session you're about to watch first aired live at LawDroid's first annual AI conference. One thing I would ask of you is to please keep in touch with us. You can subscribe to LawDroidManifesto.com, which is a newsletter where I can keep you updated about the latest developments in law and technology, and let you know about great events like this that'll keep you informed and that you can walk away from with actionable intelligence. Stay tuned.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where this finds you. Greetings from Ottawa, Canada, where it is cold and sunny. I will tell you this time of year, cold is kind of the factory setting, but the sunny is nice. The sunny is a nice little bonus. I hope everything finds you equally well where you are as well today. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to spend some time with you today, 40 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure that we nail it 40 minutes on the nose, because we have a lot to talk about. My theme is fairly broad: generative AI in the legal sector. I hope you enjoy these three lawyers straight from the uncanny valley who have chosen to join us today. It's interesting because the illustrations I'm going to use today are all from Midjourney, one of the many image creating generative AI programs. And when you look closely at the images that generative AI creates at this point, you will notice on the one hand, incredibly lifelike and detailed and extraordinary to look at, and at the same time also somehow very eerie and soulless and kind of disturbing, which I think is a fairly apt metaphor for where we find ourselves in terms of generative AI right now. We are in very early days. We are at the start of what could prove to be a real transition time in our society and in our economy and in technology, and we don't yet know. Tom kind of touched on this in his opening remarks. We don't yet know where exactly we are or where exactly we're going. But my hope today is to run you through as best I can these 5 topics. I want to give you a very brief status report, get a sense of what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, a sense of, I think this is where generative AI is in the legal sector right now and where it seems likely to go in the next little while. Chat about use cases that we are seeing, those already in the field and those that are coming our way fast. I'd like to spend some time dwelling into the impacts. Of course, we could spend a lot of time there, but I want to pick out 3 in particular. I have a few contemplations, observations that maybe we sort of think about over the course of the day and maybe take away after the session is done. And finally, some takeaways for you as lawyers, as members of the legal community. What can we do? How can we go forward in order to not just derive the most value from this extraordinary development in the legal sector, but also to find ways to help guide it forward in the most productive and the most positive fashion possible. That's a lot for 40 minutes, which is now 37. So I will waste no more time. And let's dive right into a status report. This is what you get if you ask Midjourney what the law library of the future looks like. So if you yourself are an illustrator or have friends or family in the area, wouldn't worry too much about losing your job at this point. What is going on out there in the legal sector in terms of generative AI? Here's my sense of where we're at right now. I think that the use by lawyers and legal professionals of generative AI is widespread in the law. I do not think it's commonplace. I certainly don't think it's universal at this stage. To the extent lawyers are using it, I would place it at a significant minority at this point, have either experimented with it, have used it more than once, perhaps are using it full time in a lot of the things that they're doing. But my sense is that the use is tentative. It's kind of furtive is the word I came up with. We're not really sure. Lawyers are like, we're attracted to this. We find it interesting. Those of us who played with it can see the opportunities. But there's also, I think, a degree of trepidation, which is entirely understandable and frankly not entirely unwarranted. you can kind of get a sense of why lawyers are in this position right now, because there are obviously drivers and pullers in this regard. There's pros and cons from the point of view of how lawyers relate to generative AI. The pros are pretty straightforward. The number one is it's incredibly cool. And it's really amazing. And if you have used this technology, and I expect if you are with us today, you probably have at least poked around with it, you will know that. But it's not just that it is actually cool, it actually can be very effective. You will have seen this, lawyers see this every day in the use of generative AI, but we have studies to back this up. Boston Consulting Group gathered together a few thousand of its own consultants and others at accounting firms and so forth, did experiments, and they found that consultants who did their work with the use of generative AI accomplished 12% more tasks, 25% faster, and at a 40% higher level of quality. A study out of the University of Minnesota and University of California law schools that did the same thing with law students found that students using generative AI accomplish their tasks much faster with no negative impact on quality, and remarkably enough, actually closed the gap. As we all know in most law school classes, in most groups of any kind, there's a gap of from up here to down here in terms of performance. Generative AI more or less closes that for most people. So if you graduate at the very top of your class in law school, that's not great. For the rest of us, that kind of rocks. So that in itself is really encouraging. The fact that it is such an intuitive interface. We all know as lawyers that we love simplicity. Google was the absolute perfect, back when it worked, was the absolute perfect technology for us. One page, one screen, one thing to do. Type in the thing you want and you get the results. Generative AI works basically along the same lines. Simple and easy to understand and use is perfect for lawyers. And I think that's going to draw a lot of people in as well. It is not legal technology, it is general purpose technology. And frankly, generative AI is going to be integrated into the legal profession, whether lawyers like it or not, whether they notice it or not, because of course, one of the world's finest and first adopters of generative AI has been Microsoft, and virtually every lawyer out there is using some kind of Microsoft product, whether it's Office 365. Copilot is going to become part of lawyers' workstations, again, whether they're even aware of it. So with all these pros, why would lawyers not be engaging with it? Well, let's start with the fella in New York State who decided to ask generative AI to generate some cases for him and ended up experiencing lawyers' literally worst nightmare, right? Because for the rest of the world, the worst nightmare is, you registered for that class, but you never showed up, and now the exam is here and you can't find the classroom and you're in your underwear. Fine, right? That's what normal people are afraid of. Lawyers fear exactly what happened to this guy, that your mistake winds up on the front page, literally, of the New York Times, and you become the subject of worldwide ridicule. And it's just, even talking about it, I cringe for the man. So this was not a great introduction for most lawyers for generative AI, and it triggers. People like to say lawyers are risk averse. I tend to think we're actually embarrassment averse, that we hate looking bad, and you can't look much worse than this fella ended up looking. But at the same time, there were also, probably coincident with this incident, any number of courts and regulatory bodies and ethics agencies were issuing cautions, and courts saying, don't file anything with AI and so forth, which I think kind of feeds into lawyers' natural confirmation bias that technology, nothing good can come from this witchcraft. So I think that has been a real this has really slowed things down for lawyers, and again, understandably, and again, not entirely unwarranted. But where we are seeing real investment, real progress, and real uptake, perhaps not surprisingly, large law firms, virtually everyone that I've spoken with is either at an absolute minimum quite interested in it, but many of them have either adopted one of the programs from the big three global legal information companies, Thomson, Lexis, vLex, or they have talked to some of the legal tech providers and are using something, but they're experimenting and they're putting it in sandboxes and they're using it for their own purposes, and which is great. Honestly, this is the way the legal market, this is the way any market, even here at this delightful stage of late capitalism, in which we find ourselves, ought to work, right? These are the people out there trying, experimenting, trying new things, and we're going to get some great developments and some great leaps forward in all of this. And there will be the natural consolidation, and eventually we'll get to a point where there are maybe 2 or 3 killer apps out there, and that will really, I think, supercharge lawyers' adoption. But I think in a lot of ways, the factor that really puts the brakes on the most is that we just have so much uncertainty at this early stage about the boundaries, about the parameters of generative AI. And most people talk about the ceiling, right? And that's understandable. There's conversations about, oh, how good can it get? And is it going to replace lawyers? Is it going to do this and that and so forth, and all the various apocalyptic scenarios, which don't interest me all that much, to be honest with you. I'm more interested in what's the floor? What's the minimum that generative AI can do? Because right now, generative AI is basically, I think, at the level of about a 2nd or 3rd year law student minimum. And quite frankly, you can make a case that they're at the summer associate, maybe even 1st year associate levels, or 1st year lawyer levels, depending on which angle you look at it from. I seriously doubt it's going to stop there. And that's going to have so many implications, which we're going to talk about momentarily, for so many institutions in the legal system. That's a snapshot from my perspective. We got other people coming today who are, I think, far more deeply immersed in this area. They'll be able to round that out, hopefully, and perhaps give you some more recent information. But right now, that's the snapshot that I'm seeing, and it doesn't surprise me at all. That's kind of where I think we should expect things to be at the moment. So let's talk a little bit about use cases. What are lawyers actually using it for right now? Well, by a happy coincidence, just yesterday, American Lawyer Media published a nice article in which they actually went and contacted the entire AmLaw 100, and they asked them all, what are you doing with generative AI? You can see the charts here on your screen. If the article is still available online, I'm sorry I didn't think to add a link to it in the slide, but it's absolutely worth a read. And these charts are very interesting. As you can see, about 60% of the firms did not send back a response. That's not the same thing as saying they're not using it. Frankly, I think a number of them probably are using it and don't want to share what they're up to. But of the 40% who did report back, not surprising that we're seeing it at that kind of entry-level stuff, summarizing documents, carrying out legal research, drafting correspondence, legal materials, and so forth. The most commonly cited concerns are interesting, of course. Number one being, we have to make lawyers change the way they're doing things, and that's probably going to screw things up in some fashion. Which really does actually kind of come down. That is the fundamental lawyer concern in law firms at the end of the day. So that's fine. So I think at the moment we can probably divide use cases into those that I'm certainly seeing evidence of and hearing evidence of being used not uncommonly, and those that I think we will see used a little more widely pretty soon. Again, your mileage will vary. There are some things on either side of that list that you sort of say, I'm not seeing it now, but we'll see it soon. Some of the things in soon, I'm seeing it now. But this is either the fruit that has been plucked, or it's the low-hanging fruit that's coming up next. And I find so many of these so fascinating. The idea that you can engage with a judicial decision, you can ask it, you can go to a court case and ask it questions about itself. You know, how does this apply, and what are the fundamental issues here, and how can this be applied or distinguished or what have you? That you can negotiate contract terms, right? There's products out there that are doing this now. The other side sends you a contract, and your client has said, these are my top 5 priorities in this negotiation. So you say to the generative AI, redline their contract on the basis of the priorities that client has identified. Bada bing boom, you have it right there in front of you. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff, right? 5-10 years time, I'm sure it'll be shrug it off. Okay, big deal. But let's take a moment and appreciate just how wild this is, right? We're very fortunate in a lot of ways to be here at this emergent moment of this new technology. And once again, we don't know what the ceiling is, not even particularly interested in where it is, but let's appreciate the floor is already pretty something amazing. All right. Let's talk about, I want to spend maybe a bit more time here than in other areas. I want to talk about the impacts, because as you may know, like I'm not like, I don't specialize in generative AI, right? You know, I find it fascinating. I think it has a lot of implications and ramifications for the law. The folks who are speaking later today are far more expert than I am on this particular technology. What fascinates me is what is it likely to do to the legal sector, to the legal profession, to the legal services sector, to clients, to members of the public, to the overall society in which legal services plays an important part. Now, that's a conversation that we could spend an hour having, which I promise we're not going to do right now. But I want to identify three that I think are, at least for me, the most interesting. And I think for lawyers and for law professors and for regulators, I think in many ways are the most pressing. The first of these, perhaps not surprisingly, I think that generative AI has real potential to accelerate the restructuring of the law firm business model. I want to say accelerate there because I think it's very important to make this point, and I'll try to make it again before I'm done. Generative AI is not the direct cause of the changes and will not be the cause of the changes that we're going to see in the legal world. It's going to catalyze, it's going to accelerate, but the problems and the shortcomings and the vulnerabilities and the inefficiencies of the way in which this sector operates have been around for a while. I've been yapping about them on the internet and on stages and in law firm boardrooms for coming on 20 years now, and it's not new. Right? What's new is this catalyzing force is going to come in and it's going to make some changes to the underlying fundamentals that are going to make it really difficult, I think, to continue doing things the way we've done it in the past. The obvious implication to me is generative AI is an accelerant and a condenser of legal tasks. It does tasks faster than lawyers can do them. It's going to do them, I think, in fairly short order at least an equivalent and probably a higher level of quality, certainly completely impervious to the problems of fatigue and distraction that humans, understandably, are faced with. It looks to me, again, based on those use cases that we've already seen and the use cases likely to come, it's going to consume a fair number of basic legal tasks, things that lawyers used to do, even if it's just a first-year lawyer or a summer student or someone starting off. It's going to be able to do these fairly straightforward tasks with a minimum of supervision and oversight. And it's going to accelerate and shorten the time to completion of many others. So this is the aspect of generative AI in which we see the efficiency gains that it can provide. So it's going to shorten the time and effort it takes to get legal work done. That's kind of a problem for the law firm business model, which relies upon time and effort in order to generate profits, right? Because of course, hours of lawyers' effort are the inventory of law firms. It's what law firms sell. I have this conversation occasionally. Lawyers say, no, I sell my advice, I sell my services. I said, when I look at your bill, the dollar sign is not under the great thing you did. It's under the amount of time you spent doing it. So, let's understand exactly the way this market works. Okay. So if hours shrink enough, then you're at the risk of seeing the inventory start to implode, right? It's like a higher level of productivity is great for most industries. It's not really great for an industry that is based on, if you will, reverse productivity, which in many respects the law firm model traditionally has been. The point in most law firms, in fact, in every law firm, for most of what you would call the non-equity leverage lawyers, by which we mean everybody who's not an equity partner, everybody who's not an owner, they have several names now, is to generate profits. I mean, some of them eventually become partners, but that's not the main reason you keep most of them around. If there are fewer hours to generate, then the profit equation there is threatened. Now, this isn't something that's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but I'm already talking to law firms saying, this train is coming, and I don't see a whole lot that can reroute it and send it in a different direction. It might very well be. I completely concede that with the explosion on the demand side, we'll talk about very shortly, that we may see enormous amounts of new work and fascinating work coming in, and lawyers can upscale and upgrade to that. That's wonderful. But you have to at least make some arrangements right now for the possibility that basing the pricing of our work, the compensation of our lawyers, and our overall definitions of productivity on time and effort might not work anymore relatively soon. And we have to think about, can we charge, can we price, can we talk about productivity in terms of the value that's generated, the relationship with the client, the overall contribution to the firm and its value and its values. I'd like to see that. Maybe generative AI is going to bring us closer to it, but I think the day is going to come fast when we have to grapple with generative AI's implications for the business model for law firms. All right, closely related to that, and moving to subjects kind of close to my heart, I think it's also going to have a hand in transforming lawyer development. Now, you may have heard me or read me on some occasion going off on the lawyer development system. I think the way we form lawyers is broken. It's been broken for quite some time and needs some serious renovation, if not a tear down and rebuild. Generative AI could well bring us closer to that point. If we go on the assumption, again, reasonable at this point, that generative AI is going to consume a fair amount of the basic work, that's entry-level work. And that is the work that traditionally law firms have assigned to their new lawyers, people who come into the firm. And I'm not talking here just about the giant AmLaw 100, AmLaw 10 firms, whatever. This is the way most law firms operate. This is the way we train and develop lawyers. We say, do this basic work, the document review, the due diligence, the research, the drafting, the reviewing. Do it for as long as you possibly can. We will bill out your time in that regard. And then you will, over the course of time, figure out how this all works. You'll absorb it. Osmosis will turn you into a more advanced lawyer, etc. I've never entirely bought that as a plausible theory of development of professionals, but fine. Even if we accept that, the problem is a lot of that entry-level work, I don't think is going to be there for people when they enter. And I think that is naturally going to reduce the amount of revenue you can generate from new lawyers. And law firms being the way they are, which is to say, fairly short term and simplistic in their viewpoints, are going to be tempted to say, well, if I don't have a whole lot of work for new associates, then I don't really see the point in hiring them, right? Again, some of the associates are going to become partners someday. That's great, but they ain't all going to become partners. The whole point of the pyramid is that they don't all become partners. So if they're not generating leverage revenue, what do you have them for? Now, that is not in any way what I advise or want to see law firms doing, but it wouldn't shock me if they did. And again, this is a risk. We can talk about how significant that risk is in terms of, is it likely to happen? Is it 10%, 20%, 2%? I don't know. But the payload of that risk is off the charts because our entire legal education and lawyer licensing system hinges on this idea that law firms, that the private sector will be the finishing school for lawyers in their first few years of practice. And that has always relied on the assumption that law firms can make money off lawyers while they learn. I don't think that assumption is going to fly in future. And I think the implications of that are worth sitting back and thinking hard about. What do I say to law firms in this regard? Listen, give up this idea that you are going to be able to make money off people who are very low skilled, right? Give up this idea that you're going to be able to get 1,000 or 1,500 hours or whatever out of a first year associate. It's not going to happen, right? Because you won't have the work to generate for that. But you can accelerate their growth. I tangle and I wrangle sometimes with law firms because there are some people within law firms who are very dismissive of the new lawyers coming in today, of the generation that's entering. And I'm saying, no, look, they are smart. They're a lot smarter than we are, to be honest with you, right? They are hardworking in their own way, and they are committed in their own way. They can take on a lot more than we have given them in the past. Accelerate their growth from day one. Say, how can we turn you into a great lawyer? Not enough of this up and out business where we just, toss people aside, even if they're really good at what they do because they don't fit the narrow point of the pyramid. So anyway, put away the soapbox. That's my thing. But I do think generative AI is going to have implications for the way in which lawyers develop, because the way in which we've done it in the past, give them straightforward work to learn the ropes. I just don't think that work is going to be as plentiful as it has been in the past. Talked a lot here about law firms and lawyers. It is very important that we talk about the actual world around us, the one that's kind of, butting in on everything that we're doing right here. I think generative AI has the capacity and the potential to open the floodgates of legal access, perhaps not quite as dramatically as that photo would suggest, as that imaginary photo would suggest. But I do think generative AI has the potential and will supercharge the demand side of the legal services market. This is something that, again, when I'm talking especially to regulators and to educators and to people in the profession broadly, I say, we spend too much time talking about the supply side of the market. We got to think more about the demand, about the people out there, the very small percentage of people who actually do interact with the formal legal system, with a lawyer, with a law firm, with the courts, with what all the institutions and infrastructure of legal services, but also the vast 85%, 90% of people with legal problems or life problems with a legal issue who are never going to engage with that system. And generative AI, I think, has real potential to be a big help to them. Right now, already through ChatGPT 4.0, don't mess with 3.5. If you're using 3.5, throw it away and get something else. You can get reliable answers to legal questions, and you can get competent legal documents. Perhaps I should have said cromulent, because I just love using Simpson's terms. And when I say reliable and competent, I am intentionally being very parsimonious with my praise and my adjectives here. You cannot use ChatGPT 4 to make a document that you should feel very confident in using in any kind of legal proceeding. You cannot use it right now, and I think probably for the near future, to generate something as good as what a lawyer can produce. But as I'm constantly reminding regulators, that's not the choice most people have. For most people, the choice isn't between ChatGPT and a lawyer, it's between ChatGPT and nothing. Because nothing is the only option our regulatory system allows to people if they don't want to or can deal with a lawyer. So we have to appreciate that Gen AI is poised to become a brand new player, is how I put it, in the relationship between people and the solutions to their legal issues. Because right now, there's only one line in between them. There's only one middle group, and that is the authorized suppliers of legal services. Nobody else outside that group is either authorized or competent or both in order to help. Generative AI is a wild card that has entered this area. As Thomas said in his introduction, it's not a panacea. I was having a conversation with a law school class yesterday on this very subject. And I said, no, it is not the perfect solution to all of our access to justice problems. Frankly, a lot of our access problems aren't even to do with the legal profession. They are systemic, they are institutional. We can have an entirely separate conversation about that. But it can help, and it will help, and it will be part of the overall solution. So I strongly encourage people interested in public interest law and access to justice, understand, play with this, figure out what it can do, find ways in which it can help. Right now, it needs help. It needs monitoring, it needs oversight, it needs correction, but I wouldn't count on that continuing indefinitely. All right. Going to chat a little bit here about some contemplations. And that's just kind of a fancy way of me saying, these are things to think about. Just looking for one-word titles here. Some things to think about, to reflect on, that I have been kind of puzzling over myself, thinking about where generative AI is taking us in the law. The first of these, and it kind of goes back to the difficulties that we're having in the law, with that lawyers in particular are having grasping what this technology offers. Generative AI works on it's not linear technology. I mean, you can argue if any technology is truly linear, but it's not linear sequential technology. It doesn't get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and on and on and on and on. It tends to leap, right? It's exponential by its nature. And exponential growth, as we all learned to our extreme detriment during the pandemic, is really hard for people to get their heads around. The classic illustration of exponential growth, which you may have heard, is you have a chessboard in front of you. And in the square, the lower left square closest to you, you place a single grain of rice. And in the one next to it, you place 2 grains. And the one next to that, you place 4. You're doubling the number of grains in every board. When you get to the end of that first row, on the far right-hand side closest to you, there's going to be 128 grains of rice. When you get to the far corner, the 64th square, you can't fill it because there aren't enough grains of rice on the planet to be able to do that. That's exponential growth. It's that aspect of the development of this technology, that's the kind of thing that gets people kind of freaked out, gets people worried. I mean, and we've all read that. We've all read that there's people concerned to a greater or lesser extent about generative AI. And I don't think you need to be a true alarmist. I don't think you need to be someone who's learned everything to know about AI from the Terminator franchise to be concerned about that. I do think we have to be very careful with a technology that we don't fully understand. We just had a whole movie, a movie sensation this past year about a technology that ends up having transformative abilities, but we maybe didn't think about it very well before we dropped a couple of bombs. Okay, generative AI is going to move fast. As I said before, this is a snapshot I'm giving you today, but it's a snapshot of something moving real fast, and we don't know which direction it's going to head in. Happy thought for the morning. All right. I really think that if you are in a law school, if you are a regulator, and I know a number of you are here today, we got to think hard about what generative AI is going to do here. Because as I mentioned before, I think right now you can make a case that its competence level is at the point of, say, a mid-level law student. In terms of if you gave the tasks to generative AI, to a mid-level law student, you'd probably get the same kind of answers. And no disrespect meant to the student in this regard, but they will be kind of shallow and maybe not all that well sourced, and you're not entirely certain about it and so forth. Okay, that's fine. Again, this is technology that in the 4.0 version is what, 10 months old, right? And it's going to keep on moving. The question is, how high does it move up? Does it get to a point where the floor of generative AI is at the level of a second or third year lawyer, right? And I don't know. I literally have no idea where it's going to go. Perhaps we'll hear from some folks later on today who can give you a better sense of that. But we cannot be in a position where we have a technology that is more competent than an entry-level lawyer. We can't have that, right? Because if we do, our entire system of generating lawyers, the whole transitional system of producing professionals in the law, is in some trouble, right? So I've been advising regulators and talking about these issues with regard to defining the competence of new lawyers and developing systems to help them with that. It seems likely to me we're going to have to find a way to at least keep a very close eye on generative AI in that process and find ways to perhaps incorporate it into the learning process. It's going to be tough, but once again, it is not as if generative AI alone is causing these issues. These are problems we've had for quite some time. We all know legal education is pretty messed up. We all know lawyer license. Anybody who's had to take the bar exam knows that the lawyer licensing system is kind of messed up. Generative AI is, in a way, forcing us to grapple with a lot of these fundamental fault lines and cracks in the systems that we've managed to paper over or ignore for quite some time. And then I guess the third contemplation point is, and it's kind of the sit back and think question. All right, what if generative AI really can do all these things? If it can do all the work that we've been billing and working on and so forth, if it does consume almost all of our inventory. Again, I don't know if it will, and I'm not placing any bets at this point at all, but the risk is there, and the payload of that risk is pretty significant. So we have to think pretty hard. So where will lawyers find their value? What's going to be our role? What's going to be our function? I'm working on a piece about this. I'm going to try to develop it in the next couple of weeks or so. But if we really take a step back as lawyers and think about where our highest value resides, the way I put it to someone the other day is that generative AI is going to force lawyers to practice at the top of their licenses. That's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a really good thing. What's at the top of our licenses as lawyers? What's the highest value that we can generate? And I have a working theory on that. A lot of it comes down to advisory. A lot of it comes down to advocacy. And honestly, a whole lot of it comes down to the nature of the relationship we form as individuals with our clients. And that doesn't matter if that client is an individual or is the biggest company in the world, because it's still run by and you still interact with individuals in that process. If anything, people sort of say, I think generative AI is going to remove the human element from the legal profession. I said, I think it's going to supercharge it because it's going to have because that's what's going to be left for us, right? What's going to be left for us is to create that level of relationship and trust where we are providing good counsel and we are providing wise guidance and a degree of leadership and accompaniment for our clients, because that's what they could really use. They would like to connect with us as people, maybe more so than we would like to connect with them in that regard. Anyway, those are things to think about, right? And not just to put on, as my mother would say, on the long finger, to deal with some years down the road. I think we need to think about this pretty soon. And when I say we think about it, what I mean is the appropriate authorities and institutions in this profession, state bars and courts and law societies and bar associations. I've been speaking to some of them, and I've been trying to say to them, is this a panic-driven, urgent, must deal with this right now issue? No, I really don't think it is. But you can see the wave approaching from a distance, and you can perhaps hope that the wave dissipates before it gets here. I don't feel super confident that's going to happen. So at the very least, on a contingency basis, institutions and organizations and the elements of our justice system have to be thinking hard about what's this going to mean for us, because I really think there's a lot of upside here for our profession and the people we serve. Which brings me in for a bit of a landing. Hooray. Which is what do I think the takeaways are here. And again, we could chat about this all day long, but there's three in particular that I want to kind of close with here for your consideration and moving forward. I really think right now it's a time of preparation, not just in terms of preparing our practices and our businesses and our institutions, but in our minds and in our hearts about what's this going to mean. You could take, the old joke about, whether something is a crisis or an opportunity or what have you. And of course, it's always both. Sure, we can chat about and we can worry about the threats of generative AI, and we should, but the opportunities are significant. And not just the opportunities to say, we can be more efficient and we can be more creative and we can create access and so forth, which are all real desirable opportunities. But it's also about, this is our shot. This is maybe our best shot in a while at re-examining all the assumptions we've been making about the fundamentals, about the way the legal sector works. Talking with these law students yesterday, I said, you will be the first generation to enter the profession with ChatGPT 4.0 under your belt. And it's going to give you a perspective and an angle on this and introduce dimensions to our long-standing issues of how do we make this sector work better that no one has had before. That's the opportunity that I see to say, this is a chance, a door has opened here. Can we go through it? Continue. Again, I'm sure most, if not all of you, have been messing around with generative AI to one extent or another. Please keep doing it. Experiment with it. Spend some time every day if you can find a few minutes every day. Open it up. Again, OpenAI will provide you $20. I think it's still $20 a month. You know what? That's probably gone up recently. Same thing. Bing, Microsoft's Bing has 4.0 involved. Those prices are going to go up. Access is going to get squeezed for a while, but this new provider is coming on board. The point is, find an LLM, mess around with it, pretend that it's a client, pretend that it's a judge, pretend that it's opposing counsel, pretend it's someone within your own firm, pretend it's a client, and interact with it and ask it questions and see what it can do. We talk about the efficiency piece. The creativity piece is big. It really is almost like having an incredibly eager, tireless, and let's face it, ethically ambiguous intern working for you. Okay, so see what it can do. Share with your colleagues, wherever your colleagues happen to be. Hey, I did this and I found this outcome. What did you find? What did you see with it? We're all figuring this stuff out. And to the extent you've got clients who are willing to come with you on this journey, collaborate with them. Let's schedule some time to talk about what are your issues. Let's plug them into the machine here and see what perspectives it can give for your industry, for your position in the market, whatever the case might be. And again, finally, to bring us right in for a landing, the opportunity is here to reconfigure the way we do things. Generative AI has come, maybe something even more bizarre and crazy and mind-blowing is going to come down the road later on. We don't know. We really don't have a sense of what the future is going to bring. We don't got to worry about the future. The present is challenge and opportunity enough. Think about ways to do things differently, to do things better. This is the opportunity we've got right now. I wish you every success in experimentation, in advancement, and in making the most of this really extraordinary moment in the legal profession. And with that, Tom, I am going to turn this whole thing right back over to you.
That was another great session from LawDroid's first annual AI conference. Thank you so much for watching. Please keep in touch. Subscribe at lawdroidmanifesto.com, where I can keep you updated about the latest developments at the intersection of law and technology, and let you know about great events like this. Keep in touch.